What's up, sports maniacs? I'm Justin Walters, and this is All Sorts of Sports. Welcome to All Sorts of Sports, and for today's episode, we are going to talk about Baker Mayfield. Now, this past weekend, Baker Mayfield won the Heisman Trophy. Not only did he win, he actually ended up winning by a landslide. And when I say landslide, I mean one of the most lopsided Heisman votes in the 83-year history of the award. Second place for the award went to Stanford running back Bryce Love, and Louisville quarterback Lamar Jackson ended up taking third after winning the Heisman last year. So let's talk about just how big of a landslide this win was for Mayfield. Baker Mayfield received 732 first place votes and 2,398 points. Love had 75 first place votes and 1,300 points. And Jackson received 47 first place votes and 793 points. Which means that Baker Mayfield received 86% of the total points. Now that's the third highest percentage in Heisman history, behind Ohio State's Troy Smith in 2006 and Marcus Mariota in 2014. And if we're being honest, it was pretty obvious that Baker Mayfield was going to win this year. If you look at his stats, they are completely ridiculous. He has thrown for 4,340 yards and 41 touchdowns this season. Now, whether you're a fan of Baker Mayfield or not, it is pretty apparent that he has been the best college football player this year. So just a big congratulations to Baker Mayfield on winning the Heisman Trophy. So now what's next for Oklahoma's star quarterback? Well, obviously, the next order of business is that they go up against Georgia on January 1st for a chance to go to the national championship. And then if they end up beating Georgia, they'll play either Clemson or Alabama for a national championship. And here are my predictions for the college football playoff. First, I'm going to go ahead and take Baker Mayfield and Oklahoma to beat Georgia. Then I'm going to take Clemson to beat Alabama, which would lead to a Oklahoma versus Clemson championship game. So then in the national championship between Clemson and Oklahoma, I'm taking Clemson. But that's just my thoughts, my opinions. Who do you think is going to win the national championship this year? Let me know in the comments below. So anyways, back to Baker Mayfield. So after this outstanding season and the Heisman win, it's very likely that Baker Mayfield is going to get drafted somewhere in the first round. Now, I personally would want to stay away from Baker Mayfield. Now, I understand that he has had a phenomenal college season, but I just don't see the type of game that he plays. I just don't see him transitioning that into the NFL. And there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, his actions off of the football field. Now, Baker Mayfield is known as kind of like a partier guy, which is fine. I'm not knocking that because it's college, it's just kind of what you do in college. But what worries me is when he was arrested back in February for public intoxication, disorderly conduct, and fleeing from the police. And like I said, I'm not knocking anybody for partying in college. What I am knocking is the lack of responsibility. When you're a big name figure like Baker Mayfield, a possible Heisman candidate, you take a sense of responsibility when you choose to go to college parties like that. A sense of responsibility to stay out of trouble. And number two, another thing that worries me is the antics that he has had this year on the field. And by this, I mean the game against Kansas when he was on the sideline and he yelled at the Jayhawks sideline, F you, and ended up grabbing his crotch.
And look, he's just looking at the Kansas sideline. Right there, now that's inappropriate. That's inappropriate.
Now I understand that Kansas, one, didn't shake his hand during the pregame coin flip. They were trash talking during the entire game, and they even took a late hit on him. However, if an unranked college football team is able to get this type of reaction from Mayfield, what's going to happen when he's going up against some of the world's best? So it's the maturity of Baker Mayfield that worries me. Being an NFL quarterback takes a lot of discipline, and I just don't see that in him. And the third and final reason that I have is that Baker Mayfield's game does not typically transition well into the NFL, as we've seen in the past. He's a flashy, big play type of player. So let's look at the other quarterbacks who have had the same kind of style that Baker Mayfield has had. And the players that come to mind are RG3, Tim Tebow, and Vince Young. So the fact of the matter is that flashy football players like this end up dominating in college, but then when they get to the NFL, that game doesn't quite transition into the NFL. So now if we look at the top 5 quarterbacks of this season in the NFL based on QBR, we have Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz, Case Keenum, Tom Brady, and Dak Prescott. Now, none of these guys are the flashy type of players with the attitude to match like Baker Mayfield is. These are guys that when you ask about their performance, they're not going to talk about themselves. They're just going to talk about the team. And these are guys that we never hear like off-field stories about. So due to the lack of maturity that I see in Baker Mayfield, and we've seen it a lot before, and Johnny Manziel is another guy that we've seen that flashy type of play, the partying kind of scene, and when he gets to the NFL, that game doesn't transition into the NFL. So based on the lack of maturity and the type of game that he plays, I'm going to label Baker Mayfield as an NFL bust. And I'm sure that teams are going to draft him. He had a great season. He won the Heisman. From what I know, he's a very charismatic person. So when he does these team interviews, you know, he tends to own the room. He definitely has that type of personality. So I think a lot of teams are going to end up kind of falling in love with the Baker Mayfield and hoping that he can transition into the NFL and become a big time player. Right now what I'm seeing is that a lot of NFL scouts are saying that his ceiling is Russell Wilson type of play. The only problem with that is that Baker Mayfield is nowhere near the athlete that Russell Wilson is. Sure, in college he's able to do all this stuff, but when he gets to the NFL, guys are much faster. They're much stronger. Russell Wilson ran like a 4.40 in his NFL combine. And Baker Mayfield, right now, he's running around like a 4.8. When you run a 4.8 in the NFL, you're not going to be a running type of quarterback like you were in college. So I do think that Baker Mayfield is going to be a bust in the NFL. I don't think he's going to make it very long. I think teams are taking a huge gamble if they draft him. And I definitely don't think that we are going to see a Russell Westbrook type player come out of him. But like always, that's just my opinion on Baker Mayfield, and this is a discussion show where I want to talk to you and get your opinions. Do you think that Baker Mayfield is going to do well in the NFL, or do you think he's going to be a bust? Let me know in the comments below, and those will be discussed on the community show later on in the week. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of All Sorts of Sports. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what I'm doing here, make sure you hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all the latest sporting news stories. Also, down in the description below, you will find my links to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, where content is being posted on the daily. So if you're a huge sports fan, I highly encourage you to go follow those. And one more big announcement that I have is there is officially a website for All Sorts of Sports that we're able to keep all of our videos and our articles on. Now this website is not only for this show, it is also for the other All Sorts of Sports shows. So an example right now, we have all of our All Sorts of Sports videos, and we also have all sorts of esports videos on there as well. Articles are also going to be on there too, so be sure to check that out. The website is going to be posted down below, but it's just www.allsortsofsports.co. If you go to that website, you're able to subscribe, as you can see here. Subscribe to the All Sorts of Sports page. What this will do, it'll give you updates whenever something new is posted. Whenever we post a new article, a new video, and it goes up on that website, you're going to get it to your email. And with that said, that is going to do it for today's episode. Make sure you check out the website, and I'll catch you later.
From town to town, from London to Taiwan, I've been all around the globe trying to protect your soul.